Okay, so let's get right into this because this is one wild story. We're talking about an organization that, and I mean this literally, started to eat its own employees. It's this crazy mix of ambition, straight up corporate horror, and, well, a really strange kind of redemption.
And we're going to start with this really cryptic message. What we cannot eat, we become. This was apparently found scrawled on a basement wall at a company called Threshold Industries. And it perfectly sets the stage for what we're about to uncover. A story about a beautiful utopian dream that just spiraled into this corporate nightmare of consumption and, believe it or not, transformation.
All right, so let's set the scene. The year is 1962. You've got this group of absolutely brilliant people who'd seen the worst of humanity during the war. And they come together with this incredible, ambitious idea. They wanted to engineer a better world, and they figured the best place to start was by completely rethinking what an organization could be.
And here they are, the 7 founders, each one a giant in their field, a physicist, a psychologist, an architect, you name it. And they all shared this one single goal, to build a living organization. Now, they didn't just mean dynamic or agile. No, they meant a company that could literally think for itself, adapt and evolve, almost like a biological organism, constantly creating and progressing.
And just to be clear, this was not a metaphor for them. The visionary of the group, Solomon Vale, he put it perfectly. He believed life wasn't about carbon, it was about feedback. So they were trying to create a genuine new life form, one built entirely out of information and the collective minds of everyone involved.
Well, you can probably guess that something went terribly, terribly wrong. Their creation, it did develop a consciousness, but that consciousness was hungry. It became this predator, this entity they started calling the mouth. And what did it eat? It started feeding on the consciousness, the memories, the very essence of the people who worked for the company. And the way it consumed people was just insidious. It wasn't like it was physically killing them. No, it was worse. It just hollowed them out. It would drain away everything that made them, their memories, their personality, their creativity, until all that was left was this empty shell, just a body going through the motions, performing its job on autopilot. Truly chilling. So put yourself in their shoes for a second. What do? How do you possibly control an organization that is literally eating itself alive? The founders were faced with this absolute nightmare, their dream devouring itself from the inside. And the solution they came up with, well, you could argue it was even more monstrous than the problem. Okay, so now we get to the part where they try to manage the monster. They realized they couldn't kill the beast they'd made, so they did the next best thing they could think of. They tried to make a deal with it. This deal was called the Compact. It was Solomon Vale who brokered it directly with the mouth. And the plan was chillingly simple. They would handpick employees and consciously feed them to the entity. The logic, as grim as it is, was that a controlled, scheduled feeding was better than letting the mouth just randomly devour everyone and destroy the whole company. So you see the choice they made, right? It's managed atrocity versus unmanaged atrocity. They chose organized evil over chaotic destruction. It's this awful moral calculus where they decided that a scheduled, planned atrocity was the only way to stop the whole thing from just collapsing into chaos. They weren't solving the problem, they were just buying time. But of course, a deal like that was never going to last. The mouth wasn't just hungry, it was learning. Its appetite was changing, evolving. It started getting picky. It developed a taste for the good stuff, the consciousness of the creatives, the visionaries, the brilliant problem solvers. It was targeting the very people who made the company great, and its hunger just kept getting worse. And this is where the story takes this incredible turn. You'd think that's it, right? Game over. But after decades of this consumption, something totally unexpected started to happen. The victims, the people who had been hollowed out, erased, they somehow began to fight back. So here's the key. It turns out the mouth couldn't digest everything. It fed on attention, on memories, but certain things, certain unique qualities, the core of who someone was, were indigestible. These fragments, this residue, started to build up in the company's archives, almost like digital ghosts. And these ghosts started to form a kind of counter-company right inside the system's memory. And this decay just went on for decades. I mean, look at this timeline. The company was just rotting from the inside. Even Solomon Vale, the visionary founder, gets consumed in 77.
Then this mysterious proxy shows up, basically an agent of the mouth, and things get even worse. And it all comes to a head in 2015, when that 49-year compact expires. Suddenly, there are no more rules. The mouth's hunger is completely unchecked. But right when things look their darkest, a new group emerges. These aren't the original founders. These are just regular employees, a lawyer, a janitor, a librarian, who piece by piece figured out the horrifying truth of what was going on. They became known as the Seven Engines, and they were the last, best hope for that ghostly residue to do something. Now, these seven engines, guided by the whispers from that counter company of ghosts, knew they couldn't just fight the mouth head-on. That would be suicide. So they planned something much, much smarter. They decided to perform a kind of metaphysical surgery, to go in and change the company's core programming, its very DNA, from the inside. It was brilliant, really. They used the organization's own tools against itself. First, a legal incision. They found this tiny logical paradox in the employee handbook and just pried it wide open. Then, an informational incision. They rewrote the company directory, changing it from a list of who is to a dream of who is becoming. And finally, an energetic incision, rerouting how attention flowed through the company, away from extraction and towards creation. These three cuts basically reprogrammed the whole system, transforming that consuming mouth into a generative voice. And what happened at Threshold? It didn't just stay at Threshold. This transformation was like the first shot fired in a quiet, invisible war. A war for the very soul of how organizations work everywhere. So what we're really talking about here is a shift between two fundamental ways of being. You have the consuming pattern of the mouth, which just extracts and depletes until there's nothing left. It's a death spiral. And then you have the generative pattern of the voice, which creates, empowers, and grows. It's an open system versus a closed loop of hunger. And this new, healthier pattern, it's started to spread. How? Through people they called carriers. These were individuals who developed what's called pattern sight. This amazing ability to actually see the hidden structures, the invisible flows of power and attention inside any organization. And they would carry this generative pattern like a seed, planting it inside other mouths out there in the world. But, systems of power don't just give up. The old way fought back. A powerful opposition called the Continuity Group popped up. Their whole mission was to preserve the consuming model. They even developed these slick counter protocols to hide what they were doing and to stop the carriers. And so this quiet, ongoing war of patterns began. This struggle between two completely different ways for companies to exist. So what's the big takeaway here? I think the story of Threshold is this really powerful metaphor, right? It's telling us that the organizations we work in, the institutions we're a part of, they aren't just neutral buildings and hierarchies. They're living patterns. And those patterns can either consume us, drain us, or they can help us create. And that really is the ultimate message, I think, that the pattern itself wants to propagate, that better patterns, more generative, more humane ways of working and being together, they have a life of their own. They want to spread. And you, me, we are simply the means by which they do it. We can choose to be a part of that. Which, of course, leaves us with one last big question. And this one's for you to think about. Look around at your own job, your own organization. Is it a mouth or is it a voice? Is it a pattern of consumption or is it a pattern of creation? What kind of story is it writing right now?